and we end up at the gates of a military base. These guards see the taxi pull up and they immediately point their rifles, pointing them at the taxi. And the driver gets out and they're yelling at him. He starts to walk towards them and then they turn their guns on the taxi driver and he's putting his arms up and they're yelling at him and he's yelling back. Wow, this is really exciting. This is like been in an episode of 24 or something. China. For those of you who haven't heard my other videos, I lived in China between 2013 and 2021. 8.5 years total spent in China. Why did I go to China? It didn't seem like a logical choice for me. My first girlfriend, she was Japanese. My second serious girlfriend, she was also Japanese. The third one was Chinese. Now at that time, when I was dating her, my cousin had moved to China and found himself a Chinese wife and was living really quite a large, grand lifestyle. Started out just teaching English and ended up representing schools. He became a headmaster. He did lots of public speaking and made a bit of a name for himself and even quite a lot of money. And he married a very rich woman. And he suggested to me at that time, Neil, why don't you come to China? Give it a go. At the time I was running my own painting and decorating business. You know, that exciting job of changing the colour of walls. But I was making money. So at the time I said to my cousin, thank you, but no, I'm doing okay in England. I will carry on here. Anyway. Cut a long story short, I ended up caring for my mum as she slowly died of cancer, and when she finally passed on in 2012, I was sort of alone for a year in midlife crisis. I was 40 years old, and what am I going to do? I don't know. I'd been doing IT work, and it was drying up a little bit, mainly because I wasn't chasing after it. But the truth was, I was just demotivated. My mother had died, I was deflated, a bit directionless, and didn't know what to do. I got back in touch with my cousin, and I said, is that opportunity still there to come to China? He said, yes, of course. Come over to China. And after I made the decision, literally 3 weeks later, I'm on a plane flying out to China. I'd got rid of my car and all my stuff. I had to leave my computer technology behind. I spent a lot of money on an expensive Samsung laptop, so I could at least have a reasonable computer while I travelled. And off I went to China. Quite an experience. I knew nothing about China. Being a movie-obsessed nut that I am, I knew about the Zhang Yimou movies. You may have heard of Hero, or House of Flying Daggers, or Curse of the Golden Flower. These were the big, epic, sometimes often with martial arts, historical epics. Very beautifully shot, beautiful music. I really like these movies, but that's really all I knew about China. Everything else I thought was like Chairman Mao China. I thought it was just exactly the same as North Korea. You know, people in uniform, saluting the flag, walking military uniforms, that whole thing. That's what I thought China was. I had no idea. So I was quite a surprise when I got there. I went to a city called Guizhou, which is in Guangdong, which is South China, which is not too far north of Hong Kong. Wow, what an experience. Nothing could really have prepared me for just how different from my expectations it actually was. On appearances, the first thing you notice about China is it doesn't look like China. It looks like America, or at least this particular city did, and it's surprising how similar the other cities around, at least in Guangdong. The city of Guizhou looked to me like an American city. American buildings, American-style high-rise, American-style taxis, everyone's wearing Western clothes. It was nothing like I pictured. In my mind, I had the stereotypical idea that all Chinese people still wore either traditional clothes, like the robes, you know, of ancient China, or they were dressed like people from the communist era, of what I thought of as modern communist China. It was more like America than England, really. The way the Chinese act and think, they really are more similar to Americans. I think English people have a lot more in common with Japanese people. Japanese people are, on the whole, more individualistic, more creative. Although they do have a group mentality when it comes to work, a lot of art and culture, creativity comes out of Japan. I'm a big fan of anime and manga and Japanese creativity, music, artwork. Now in China, very little of that. That's one difference between China and America, certainly. It's not creative at all. Any creativity you see is just copied off somewhere else. But their thinking and their business approach and the scale upon which everything is done, it's larger than life, it's loud and it's big, rather like America. Or at least that's my impression of America. I've only ever actually been to New York and a brief stay in Philadelphia. So when I arrived in China, the main thing I wasn't used to was the climate. It's tropical. It's really hot all the time. I got to know air conditioners very well and became dependent on fans and air conditioners. And one of my friends who travelled all over the world told me, "Oh, don't worry, Neil, you'll get used to it. It's no big deal." 8.5 years, I never got used to it. It was just sweating and hot all the time. I'm actually very, very comfortable in cold climates. I've always preferred the cold, so it seemed like an odd choice. You know, Neil's dated Japanese girls, he loves the Japanese culture, and yet here he is in China. And the Chinese, they're very friendly to outsiders. The only people they're really racist to are the Japanese, which is quite funny because they're quite similar. At least from a Western point of view, they're actually nothing like each other on the inside. So, in China, I arrive in this tropical place where there's mosquitoes and cockroaches, but green fireflies. By the river near where I lived, there's these beautiful green glowflies that glow in the dark, and they are beautiful, fairy tale magical even. Now, I ended up teaching English in a school with ages anywhere from kindergarten upward to teenagers that are ready to go off to university. Various different classes teaching students of all different ages. With every class, you have an assistant to help you. This is usually a young lady, often in her early 20s, just out of university, or maybe a couple of years older, maybe mid-20s, either looking for some work experience or just the best job they can, or ones who are wanting foreign experience, where they get to meet foreigners. Now, most of the foreigners in China are young guys in their 20s, usually men. You do get a few girls come over, but mostly they're young men. They teach part-time, the rest of the time is party time. They can date lots of girls, they've got enough money to go out drinking almost every night, live large, they get the nicest apartments on the top floors, and they get treated far better than they really deserve. They can be complete nobodies if they've come from England or America, and yet they get treated like semi-celebrity or even royalty in China. It's quite amazing. Now, I stood out a little bit because I was middle-aged, I was 40 years old, and I learned from my cousin it's actually a good idea to dress smartly. Put on a shirt and tie, some shiny shoes and some smart pants, and you'll be taken far more seriously. And that's exactly what happened. I ended up getting invited to universities to give live speeches in front of huge crowds with a microphone. I'd never done anything like this before. Huge difference to what I was used to. But I tell you what, the excitement of holding a microphone, everything's on a huge scale in China. So when you go to the universities, these massive halls and massive rooms where you're on stage and it's just a sea of people you're talking to, and they're all hanging on your every word because you're a foreigner and they want an insight into the West, and many of them have never met a foreigner before. You get treated very, very well. It was very, very exciting. You almost feel guilty because you get paid very well, and you're getting paid for having fun. Being treated like a celebrity, and you think, wow, gosh, this is amazing. So anyway, I could talk at length about this, but within 2 weeks I met a girl, and 2 weeks later than that, I should say a woman, shouldn't I, not a girl. She's 10 years younger than me, that's why I said girl. I was also an English teacher in just a normal public school. After 2 weeks she became my girlfriend, and after 2 years she became my wife, and still is my wife. She's in China right now, and she can't leave because of COVID restrictions, so we're hoping that will be lifted and she can come and join me in Cheltenham, England, which is where I am now. I'll just share one amusing experience which did fit in slightly with the Chairman Mao view of China. The school where I worked had other schools, and one of them was sort of like in a backwoods area. You had to go through pretty much a wilderness. There was a motorway between the main city and this little town where this other school was. Me and my cousin, we went out to the school, we did a bit of teaching, a bit of public speaking. We actually got a taxi back, a taxi that took almost an hour. Taxis are super cheap. That even an hour in the taxi, it worked out like £7. Amazingly cheap. On the way back, driving the taxi going down this dark motorway with no light, with no street lights, and they don't have the reflective signs or glowing pavements or whatever, the fluorescent paint. So it's just a dark road. So I couldn't speak any Chinese, and though my cousin had been there a few years, he couldn't speak any Chinese either. And the taxi driver says something to us, we've no idea what he says, and he just turns off the road, goes on this really bumpy back track, and we end up at the gates of a military base with armed guards on the gate. These guards see the taxi pull up, and they immediately get nervous, and they point their rifles. I don't know exactly what kind of guns they were, pointing them at the taxi. And the driver gets out, and they're yelling at him, and they're pointing their guns actually at the taxi for some reason, like they were going to shoot the taxi. He starts to walk towards them, and then they turn their guns on the taxi driver, and he's putting his arms up, and they're yelling at him, and he's yelling back, and it really looks intense. From my immature point of view, it was like, wow, this is really exciting. This is like been in an episode of 24 or something. And then it's like reality, Craig, what if they shoot him? And it's like, you know, we're stuck in the back of this taxi. I'm exchanging looks with her because neither of us are saying anything. We just think, just keep out of this, you know, just let it unfold how it should go. One of the guards turns around, opens the gate, and this guy comes out in like, you know, one of these uniforms that pop with medals on it, like a general or something. Cousin and I are in the back of the taxi. This guy gets in the front seat, and he turns around, and he grins, and he starts talking to us in Chinese. We're just smiling back and nodding, having no idea what he said. That's why the taxi pulled off. It was to pick this. I don't know if he was a general. I mean, that might be me just exaggerating, but he looked like a general. What in my mind would be a Chinese general, high-ranking military type dude. Anyway, it all calmed down. The guards calmed down, and we got in the taxi and we drove back to the city with this rather fun, cool, exciting story to tell. This all happened within my first few days of arriving in China, so this was my first impression. Hi everyone, my name is Neil Carpenter. I am the computer games developer who made Lord Temin's Fortress. You can see the description below. If you like this video, please subscribe or like. Thank you. Have a great day.